Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And this week, joining us from Minneapolis in the US is Tomo Lennox. Hi, Tomo. Welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So Tomo has 20 years experience in project management, both waterfall and agile, and that's important for what's coming next. A few years ago, he was at David Anderson's first Kanban Conference and has been a fanatic ever since. Even though he has lost several jobs as a result of it, Tomo became an advocate for projection over guessing and reactive planning. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that as we go through our week of episodes, Tomo. But let's start with a simple question. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the Scrum Master is the entry to anything important these days. Certainly, if you want to do Scrum, you have to be a Scrum Master. But I think if you wanted to teach Kanban, they wouldn't give you the job unless you had a Scrum Master certificate. So it is the door into Agile, I think.
Absolutely. And how did you get in that door?
So I like to think that I invented Agile a long time ago, but I wasn't smart enough to write the book on it. And so as I was sitting, I think,
or the manifesto, right?
Well, before the manifesto, I was doing my first Agile project, but I didn't document it. And so even though I thought this was going to be great, one by one, people started writing their books like, oh, I guess it's been done now.
By the way, that's a great tip for all of you Scrum Masters out there. If you want to be recognized for something, it's good to write it down. And of course, you don't need to write it as a book. You can write it as a blog, right? Because things do tend to catch on in the community. And that's a great way to both contribute as well as get recognition for the work that you're doing. Very well, Tomo. So, of course, today's Monday. And as we do every Monday, we like to dive into some of those tough moments in our careers, the difficult fail stories that we all have to share and we can all learn a lot from. So share your fail story with us, Tomo, and then let's later on dive into the learnings. But tell us the story first.
Sure. So here's a story for you. I was on one of my first Scrum Master jobs. The company was developing this big product that was a make it or break it kind of product, and it was taking more and more time and money. And they were all getting nervous and throwing more money at it. And by doing some, how can I say it? ScrumBan, let's say, doing ScrumBan, I was able to keep inching the velocity up and up and up. And I got it from 35 up to 65, which I thought was phenomenal by doing ScrumBan and more Kanban. And then when they finally spent as much money as they could stand, they decided the problem was Kanban, and I was out.
That is something that I'm sure many Scrum Masters can relate to, right? Like when we push for something, when we stand out and start talking about a certain way of working, if something goes wrong, and inevitably over the life of a lifetime or a career time that we have, something will always go wrong. Right? It's very easy to then just point the finger to that. But when you look back, Tomo, and we look at that story, like, how did that start to develop? Because I'm sure that it was also clear for everybody that the velocity was going up. Perhaps the team was feeling better regarding, their contribution. How did things start to turn sour? And more importantly for us as Scrum Masters, what was starting to turn sour, even though teams were delivering more and more?
Mm-hmm. I think the problem was the way they defined success. They wanted a product that would come out at number one in the market. And they had competition. So the competition had products that they were making better and better and better. So no matter how hard we worked, you couldn't get in front of everybody on your first try. And those of us who were Agile tried to teach them about minimum viable products and incremental releases, but they would not have it. We're going to wait until it's the best and then we'll release it. And there was never a time like that.
That's actually a very good point. We very often hear this. I'm sure you've heard that, especially because you have also a waterfall background. So do I. I was a project manager in the pre-agile times. And one thing that I heard a lot at that time, and I'm sure you did too, was this idea that we'll release it when it's ready, right? And there's this magic, mythical idea that at some point, somebody will magically figure out that this is ready and it will go out as number one. But of course, we know now, I mean, having gone through all of those experiences, you and I, that that's not possible. But how can we explain this to our Scrum Master friends out there? What are the reasons why the first time we put something out, it can't be ready and it can't be number one?
Yes, that's right. It's the world is just way too complicated for anybody to think and think and things like, I have it. This is the answer. You can get little pieces of it, and you can get relative success, but perfection is a pretty hard thing to start with. It's got to be incremental, right? That's the Agile lesson.
And I think that that's the key, right? Like the idea that you can get something from paper, right? Like pie in the air type of concept, right? Like something that was magically thought out by someone, and then suddenly make it reality, and everything works the first time. And we know that even companies that are famed for that, like Apple in the case of hardware and software products, have tremendous failure stories when it comes to releasing one thing first time and be a success. Of course, they also have success stories, but as you say, if you try long enough, the iteration will make it look like it was a success. But in fact, you went through a lot of smaller failures in order to get there.
That's right.
And how do you work with your teams to bring that message home? Because it's not necessarily easy to do that.
Mm-hmm. So on the simple level, I push demos, right? If they're demoing, they're learning. And if they're not demoing, they might not be. And the demo really should be to somebody who's a customer, not just the product owner. The product owner says, that's great. That's just what I wanted. It's like, no, you really want somebody who's a customer, a business user, someone. At the business level, I think it probably goes higher than that. But at the team level, demos are good enough.
Absolutely. And what are some of the, I don't know, like how do you set it up? Like what are the things that you bring up in those conversations with the teams to drive home the value of the demo and the interaction that comes from it?
Mm-hmm. I think in the beginning, people just want to have it done. They did the code, they did the test. I want to finish it and give me the credit for it. And so it's kind of disruptive for me to say, well, have we done a demo on it? My two favorite things about Scrum are the sprint goal and the sprint review. And in the last 5 years, I've only met 2 teams who use either one of them. That sprint review is pretty powerful, where you can sit down and think, where are we? How is it looking? And if you can get a few outside people into that, you will learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I once heard this idea that, nobody gets it right the first time, but not everybody needs to know you didn't get it right the first time. Right? So if you do those iterations with a smaller group, including customers as much as possible, you're not actually exposing the product to the whole world. You're not, coming out with the product. You're really just getting feedback. And as you iterate through this, you learn from customers and you come up with ideas that weren't there to begin with. And you are able to iterate, improve the product. And then finally, when it comes out, it looks like it was a one-shot wonder, but it wasn't in reality.
Marty Cagan, he wrote the book Inspired, which was very inspiring. And he said one of the success strategies is to have a reference customer. You get a customer that likes you and you like them, and you get together and you develop it together. And when the reference customer finally decides it's okay, you can think about showing it to somebody else.
Get a reference customer. That's a great tip. And definitely we'll put the link to the book Inspired by Marty Cagan on the show notes. Tomo, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing these ideas and stories with us.
It's good to be here. I'm honored.
Monday is about what we learn from our obstacles and our failures. But tomorrow is Team Tuesday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. We explore teams and their journeys, the habits they develop that threaten their performance, how each of our guests helped their teams evolve, and the one key lesson they learned from that experience. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.